you all have to brag on this anyway, but it does make you appreciate Miss Vijaya and how much she does. Okay, it may always be a square, but Linda and Lisa are almost never that far away.
Yeah, we all just sit more
Yeah.
around.
Then we will call the Germantown Municipal School District Board of Education working meeting to order. I hope everyone had a lovely spring break, came back nice and rested, although Miss Oath came back sick from her cruise. That's too bad. I hate that. Anyway, Mr. Haddow, you're first up with a HR update this evening.
Jason, it's kind of an outline of different topics. And there's some typos in there. I think I had some spring break leftovers, so if you see one or four, part of it.
And as I'm going to interrupt you for a second. As Mr. Haddow begins, I'd like to ask all of your help this evening. We have a really extensive agenda, so if you could make sure your questions are very concise, and if we can police each other so that we only speak twice to any one item, that will help make sure that we get everything done expeditiously and we are not rushing at the end like we normally do. Is everyone okay with that? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Haddow?
The topics are identified by Roman numerals in an outline format. The first one is Health Call Solutions. We use them as our third-party administrator. We've used them since we've been up and running. So this is the 4th year. We can extend it another year for the 5th year, which is my recommendation. Their rates of the services they provide, they are not going up based on the email that I got from Andrew Pitt, who works for Health Call Solutions. The only thing that may change with their rates is that stop-loss insurance, which is yet to be determined. Usually they determine at the end of the year after they get all the claims and the cost of the catastrophic insurance claims that do arise. The other deal is that strategically there are some other bids that will have to be made next year, 2019. I'd like to do them all at one time rather than changing a third-party administrator now and then doing bids next year with these other insurance providers. I think our employees are happy with Health Call Solutions as well.
And we are the only district that hasn't seen an increase every single year in health insurance. So it has been a very good choice. It was a difficult one for the board early on, but I'm glad that we went the direction we did.
So to renew, it's the question that's posed is do we put it up for bid, third-party administrator, or do we stay the course for another year with Health Call Solutions? Again, my recommendation is that we stay the course, especially since the rates are not going up of the services they provide. So that's topic number one, is just to let you know that we did get an email from Brittany Shue, who is our consultant with ESP services, not EAP services, but ESP services. And she was asking, do we want to bid it or not? And if we were going to bid it, now is the time. But after talking about the call solutions, I do not see a need to do that.
So hold course for just one more year, and then we'll go out to bid again to see what the market, what is in the market. But if we hold course one more year, then we can keep our employees' rates the same for health insurance.
What are the other things that will be coming up for bid next year?
You
mentioned?
have private division, the Davis vision, you have long-term
Okay.
disability, short-term disability.
Okay.
Maybe the dental.
Okay.
I think all those agreements were made last year.
Okay.
My goodness, my memories.
Sure,
But
sure.
I think it's a 2-year agreement.
Okay, okay.
So those would be others. Topic, any other questions on that? Topic number 2 came up, and this was of interest. I'm talking to Bob Shue, who is also with DSP and RDA. He presented something to me that was free, and when I heard the word free, I thought, hopefully it's free. But he's saying that you can go into pharmaceutical savings by using a pharmacy benefits provider, or manager, excuse me, a pharmacy benefits manager. It's no cost to us to explore this utilization of this type of person. So I told him to go ahead and do it to see if we could save money with pills and medications that our employees are on. In particular, he said that the generic cost, that you can save a lot of money through the generic meds, which was new to me. I had to do a little bit more reading from it or seek his expertise. So right now that is going on, is that they're seeking ways to possibly save some money on pharmaceutical costs.
So do they have somebody that we would pay to do that, or we would hire somebody?
They're doing it. So what they asked for us is
It's a free service.
a census and the actuaries on their behalf take a look at it. Yeah, they take a look at it.
And part of this is the education piece too. You know, if you're getting a prescription for an antibiotic that your doctor, for a reason, are they giving you a name brand or are they giving you a generic? A big portion of what we spend for health insurance is the pharmaceuticals. So that could be a huge savings for the district.
And from my limited reading on this, you may have like a 30% savings. So we're taking a look at it. But I think there's some cons to it as well. My job is to educate you guys as the cons after I take a look at it. The other one, any questions on that? The third one is the 10-year list celebration. And I'm doing this by memory. I think you were given the list last.
Yes.
last
We
month.
were.
And I think on that, there's a typo here as well. Probably one of several during there. But legally, I tried to define the tenure status and why it's so important. And then legally, that there's probably really 2 cohorts of people we're really looking at. Those people that were non-tenured, that came over on a probationary status, that are at the level at their year 5, they are up for tenure, believe it or not, because we can track them, we can see how they perform. But then there's the new hire that serves 5 years on probationary status, with the last 2 years, year 4 and 5, being at above expectation or significantly above expectation. The people on the list that you were given are everyone that we've tracked and we've vetted through the use of the principals and we get the word out and visiting schools who these people are. I think the decision point that you have to make as a board is that you vote on whether or not, and you have dialogue or discourse on whether or not these people deserve tenure.
It is our request tonight that the board approve the tenure list so that at our next board meeting, we can have the celebration to really recognize those teachers. So I'll cut it short.
Yeah, thanks. I did quote policy. If you decide not to choose someone on the list, we cannot renew it next year. We cannot give them a contract based on our policy. So be aware of that. I think most, looking at everyone, I think everyone's fine with the list, but I don't want to be presumptuous as well. But I think we need to vote on it tonight so we can celebrate the superintendent.
It is on the agenda. Does anyone have any questions on the tenure list?
No.
Is it on,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is it on the consent agenda or the?
I'll have to look.
The only reason, I think this is a very big deal. I mean, I think it's, and so the only thing I would say is that if it is a part of the consent agenda, maybe to pull it out so that we can verbally vote. I'm okay if we don't do that, but it's a big deal for a lot of teachers, and I think it would be something good to highlight as a separate item that we vote on.
But are we
It
celebrating?
is currently under consent agenda
Not
as,
tonight, we're just,
That's what I said,
we're
we're
setting up for
celebrating
April.
next, yeah, we're just going to announce all the next meeting and celebrate it then.
it is under 8B, under the consent agenda at this time.
I'm
So
okay
is
either way.
there-
I just think it's, I mean, it's, you know, it's the official vote.
Is anybody, does anyone object to pulling it out and putting it on the action item agenda? Can we alter the agenda accordingly,
So then
please?
it would become 9F. So 8B, approval of tenure list, will become
I'm
9.
texting you.
9.5. Yeah. The only people who are going to have an objection are the people who have never done this before.
That's right. We're doing the full works tonight.
Okay.
Next topic, Ms. Landers.
Yes, please.
Early contracts, 3 early contracts have been already granted to 3 people for next school year. And we did it based on hard-to-fill areas, and we did it through recruiting people off our Apple Tracks platform. So we reach out, we email, we contact, and we do a search on it. We try to get in HR, we try to get in the habit of looking through the Apple on Apple Tracks, and we try to send email communications out to them weekly, especially hard-to-fill areas. Right now, we're getting a list of teachers who have filled out their intent whether or not to come back. So these positions, we know that through through communications, that there's some people that are saying, hey, we're resigning or we're retiring. So all 3 of them, except for William Houston, he was hired part-time this year. We've decided to offer him a contract for full-time because he's grown that program. And the topics is hard to find. He's a CTE teacher. And if you look at what he's going to teach next year, principles of manufacturing, dual enrollment mechatronics, and dual enrollment mechatronics 2, he's really providing a service for some kids in that area of technical expertise. So he's accepted and he's going down.
Great, excellent.
And he had other choices. I mean, there's some other systems that offer an early contract as well.
That's great.
So I went out to Houston, the culture and the climate creating for him because he had another course. Amy Herod was a person we found on Apple Tracks. If you just look at her endorsements and what she's done in her young career, I think she's a 2-year teacher. She is really, she's hedged her bets, elementary ed, biology, general science, middle grades, math, special ed. Science, if you look at the name of the school where she's currently working, it is a school system, actually, the Academy of Innovation of Science in Mississippi. She has accepted, and she had another option as well, local option. Another system was trying to get her. She chose us after she took a visit to Riverdale. And we need that talent. She's a science STEM person. She has a passion for it. So she accepted. And Krista Matheny was someone that we found over at the University of Memphis and through Apple Tracks, so a combination of both. And she's a SPED person. And if you look at her SPED, it's K through 5 and K through 12. She also brings something I have a bias towards, which may not be good or bad, but she is from Kenya, so she has a global world view of cultural stuff as well. But if you look at her bullet number 2, she is a coordinator at the Life Church, and just that coordination and overseeing 40 people and going after something, to me that shows initiative and leadership. And so she's coming here from a global perspective and a leadership perspective. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. This is the first year, and I think my head off to Superintendent Manuel and the board is, hey, be a little bit more proactive in your pursuits. And when we are, we're getting a list, generating a list of people that are retiring or resigning, and now we're going after people and trying to and get them. I will say this, is we have, because we're conservative, is we've cut back on some of our recruitment. And this is the first year that we've done this because we want to see a compare and contrast. We are not going to the UT Knoxville. Last year we pulled 3 people in that wanted to visit our system. One was offered an early contract, he turned us down. And we thought, Lordy, we can save $5,000 by not making that trip, and let's go after it through Apple Tracks. And so we're kind of doing a compare and contrast, and we save money, and we may have to revisit that, but I did want to bring that to your attention, what we're trying to do. Any questions on those? Head football coach update, and this is a mistake on my end, but not really because it's the March board meeting. The posting was the closing of that posting is March 29th. If you look at the applicant pool right now, there are 9 people in that applicant pool. It is still a little bit early, and I've lost track of time. I thought this Friday was the closing date, so I was moving faster in my mind than what actually is. So March 29th is the closing on that job. My take on that is twofold. It comes from a school system in my experience. I want a teacher first. That's how I'm wired. What you're going to find is if you have a strong teacher, you're going to have a strong coach. And I've seen it. I've seen it in my 28 years of experience. The other side of it, though, is we have to use that non-faculty coach allowance that the TWSOA provides us, because there may be someone that is awfully talented out there that is just a football coach and is working somewhere else. So both avenues are going to be considered. But my own preference is that that person is a teacher They better be just as strong as in the classroom as they are on that football field. Why? Because they're serving just as many kids, if not more, than they are on the football field. But I did want to give you an update on that. It will be done through a committee that me, Mr. Cherry, and Superintendent Manuel are working on, and Mr. Bland. So it'll be a committee.
And Mr. Franklin may be drafted to be serving on that committee.
Correct.
So he may be hearing for the first time.
When you see non-applicants submitted, not submitted, that means not submitted means they haven't completed the application yet. So if there's none, we'll continue on. We'll probably get some others. In closing, the action items, and I don't know if maybe I need to look at this. There are some teachers that are going to be presented tonight. The teachers of the year. There's 3 of them. I don't know if that was on the work session.
Yeah.
Missed that. But there's 3 that are going to come tonight. Or hopefully they make it tonight. One is Courtney Bergen, who's from Farmington, first grade teacher. The other is Shannon Ward, who's a 5th grade teacher at Riverdale. And the third one is Michael Robinson, who's a Houston High School geography teacher. One of those 3 has been selected by the Tennessee Department of Education to represent and be considered for the Southwest Region Teacher of the Year. And that's Michael Robinson. So they're all 3 going to. And when I present them, I'm going to do the 2 ladies first because Michael's moving on. I'm going to do him last, so it's not going to be out of order.
Courtney's last name again, I'm sorry.
Bergen. But it looks like Bergren.
Yeah, it
I
does.
probably mispronounced it.
Double G's. Okay, I'm gonna just guess really well.
Berggren.
Got it.
And I'll butcher the name when I'm up there. But I did want to give you an update on that because I think those 3, when you look at their resumes and what they've done and their accomplishments, it is really powerful to have these 3 in our system. So action items, just for your consideration, I think we've already talked about it.
Yes.
Thank you if there are no other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haddow, very much.
Great job.
I think the next item is the
Second reading policies.
well, we had the, for some reason, I had the tenure list.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, that was
Tenure
part of
list.
the HR.
We're okay with the tenure list, okay? Then we'll move on and we'll go with the annual review of policies.
We're saving you all kinds of time, Betsy.
Okay. For the second reading policies, I hadn't heard any questions or concerns for board members from the policies that we had previously discussed, so I just assumed that we are moving on with
Everyone okay?
first reading policies.
Then we'll move on to the first reading policies. Dr. Park?
Okay, so we have a few policies that we are requesting revisions to, and most of these revisions are coming from the SBA or the state board meeting in January for the final reading of those policies and then the SBA's recommendations. So I want to walk through these policies quickly with you. The first one is 4.206 special programs. The change in this policy is for homebound instruction. Again, we hold to the 10 consecutive school days for student missing for a minimum of 10 days. And so we clarified the language here under homebound instruction. This also is clarified based on the truancy and chronic absenteeism movement for the state that's in Tennessee's ESSA plan. So we've just clarified that a little bit further with illness or injury or just general homebound. You will have a policy that's coming up from our exceptional student department that also discusses homebound. It's a little bit more detailed
Sure.
because of the current situation. That's 4.206, and I'll run through all of these and then we can ask questions. 4.603, promotion and retention. The state of Tennessee is really focusing on promoting students based on academic success with state standards. And so what we are doing is clarifying our promotion and retention policy to make sure that if we retain a student, that parents are informed well ahead of time that that is looking like that's going to be the path for that student. The parent gets a chance to conference, then if the student is retained, an individual remediation report or plan is going to be developed for that student and given to the parents within 10 days. And then those students will be tracked for the next 3 years to have an update on that remediation plan to try to ensure that these students are getting the assistance that they need to meet those academic standards. making it easier to read, but also for us to meet those requirements of promotional.
So are these recommended by TSBA, or was this what we initiated based on?
A little of both.
Okay, sure, okay.
So it's a
Sure.
combination of what our current policy was, and what we know, talking to the principals, that they have used in practice that
Great.
works for them and then aligns with what the state has approved.
Okay, thank you.
This seems, I mean, just in reading it, it seems to put more on the superintendent than in the past, and I just wanted to make sure you're
There are
comfortable with
changes,
that?
there are requirements to
Okay.
retain students that.
That was my question,
Yes.
because I was concerned that it's pushing a lot that is school level onto our director of schools.
It goes through his office, and then we kind of manage it with the principals of the school through
Okay.
academic, because that's where, if they are in RTI or if they are needing to be referred for other services, then that should be part of the plan.
Right.
So we keep him informed to know, he knows all of the students that are retained every year.
Right.
And we should have lots of documentation prior to a student being retained. And that's the goal of the state with the RTI program and processes that we have that in place. But yes, you are correct. There is
But it also does say superintendent/designee.
designees.
Right, I understand. I just wanted to make
But
sure,
yes.
because it is a change of wording from the professional staff shall place the students at grade level as opposed to the
Yes.
superintendent/designee. So I was concerned about his workload looking at this
And
as well as.
it's a shared workload. It is not.
Okay, so
Okay,
it's not.
okay.
Again, I was just concerned because again, it just seems like we're elevating school level business to district level.
Well, it is, and,
Okay.
but the thing is, it's still a good partnership that we have at the school level, so we're
Okay.
not, they already have these
They're not being
processes in place.
usurped.
Yes.
No,
Okay.
so they will continue that, we just keep, we take on the responsibility to also monitor it at the district.
Okay, thank you.
And then the next policy is 4.605. So the requested revisions on this policy, you will see a lot of highlighted yellow additions here. We have previously had two policies, 4.605 and 4.6051, where we listed graduation requirements and then we listed high school diplomas.
This is merging the two.
We are merging the two, so that's where you see a lot of the yellow. That's just bringing in anything dealing with graduation that our families want to know, our students want to know, will be listed in this one policy. The major addition to this policy, aside from us moving the items over that detail the traditional high school diploma requirements, Tennessee diploma with honors or distinction, and then GMSD honors diploma, is when we get to the special education students, and this was a joint effort with Sarah Huffman. She and I got together to make sure that we had all of these laid out under the special education students, and then added what the state has added, the additional diploma type for the alternate academic diploma. And so that lists the requirements to achieve that, or to earn that diploma. And then we've also added in the early graduation. This is something that you may have heard of as Move On When Ready. And it's where students can declare that they would like to graduate early in ninth grade or as soon as possible. They will have to double up on some of the credits. So, for example, they may have to take 11th and 12th grade English, but they are, this is for students who are really going to go to like a technical school or a 2-year community college, because most 4-year universities want the additional credits. So that's conditional entry into a 4-year university, but we have had some students request this option, so we wanted to make sure our policy stated what the state allows us to have.
And for the most part, for us, it's been athletic. So we'll have some athletes who are going to graduate early and they're going to compete in the spring season at the universities that they're choosing to attend. So it's been very limited in our district that we have it, but this spells out everything for the public.
And then the final one for tonight out of my department is 4.606 graduation activities. This is very similar to what we had in our previous policy, except it is a bulleted list that the state recognizes for any students who are falling in any of these categories. You'll see lines 24 through 33. We wanted to include all of these honors because we may have students who come in their senior year to graduate who might be a Tri-Star Scholar or might have completed IB programs. So we wanted to make sure that they are recognized no matter whether we offered it or not. If it's something that they earned in a Tennessee public school, we wanted to have them be recognized at graduation. So that is the list. It is the official list from the state, so we wanted to include that in our policy.
Any questions?
Not on the revised ones. I had, and I apologize for not sending this afternoon when I finished reviewing, but just on two of the ones that were to be reviewed with no revisions, I just had a question about who does it. The extracurricular activities and the interscholastic activities. For the interscholastic activities, there's a lot of detail in there about health forms and basically, I think it's the TSSAA rules and requirements that you have to have. Who does that? Like, who keeps up with all of that?
It's a combination of the athletic director at
Okay.
the high school
Okay.
and the coaches themselves. So when we've got middle school sports, they're the ones who are getting more sponsors. If we're talking about the cheer pom teams, they're the ones who are collecting those
Okay.
releases from the parents.
And do they stay just with the coaches, or is there a
We
central
actually
place
have,
where we keep them?
Mr. Bland has been working with an online system that we have to track and monitor
Oh, wow.
that information at the high school level. So that's
Lot easier.
That's up and running. So, we have that contract with Ortho One. So Trip Turner, who's I don't know if you've met him or had any interactions with him, he also helps with this process too,
Okay.
making sure that everything's getting uploaded. But
Okay. And then for the extracurricular activities, it talks more about the sponsor. Do we have a policy that covers the non-sponsored, where I know we have ones that cover the organizations and what they have to give to us, but is there something that we're reviewing as we have groups that aren't necessarily, we don't have a sponsor designated, that we have a policy that covers them and what they should be doing and what are?
no, because for us, if it is not a sponsored activity, then we're not taking on liability or responsibility for managing that program.
Okay.
The second that we do that, we have to have staff. And so that's the difference in the categories of the program. So
Okay.
once we have staff who are involved, they're the ones who regulate it. But if we take on any regulatory function for that group, then we become liable for their activities. So if there are injuries, if there are procedures or things that happen with those groups, then we could be liable if we don't have staff that are monitoring those activities.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is no, we do not regulate those activities. The request that we do have is we do designate those as being not school sponsored.
Right.
And so we ask them not to use the district or school names and the names of their teams or programs, so that there is a delineation between club activities that are outside, like I said.
But they are using them.
They're
If they
supposed.
say club, like,
Well, if they can have the word club they can have the word club in their name to designate it as being different. You're correct. So
Okay.
but they have to. They're not the school-sponsored activity.
Right.
Right.
In 4.6 grading, there's a note, we will be revising at an upcoming meeting to include attendance exam exemption. I just have a request that as you look at that, you also consider looking at the timing of grades being entered into Skyward for teachers and potentially having some type of timeline for them.
Yes.
Because I've been hearing a lot from both students and parents, some frustrations about waiting to the last minute, not getting their kids' grades, or the kids not knowing what their grades are until the very last minute, and then not being able to recover from that. So if we could look at what policy might be necessary. I
Yes,
know
we do have it in grading, the policy that they have to have half of their grades entered by the progress or interim.
right, but that's by interim report, and then you've got 4 more weeks of grades.
that might
So
not get in until the last
That may not
week.
get in until that last day. And so if y'all could just explore it and see what you come up with. I know I've looked at some other counties, and some have a 2-week window, some have a week window, some just say in a timely manner. So whatever y'all look at and think is wise, I would love that to be part of the discussion when you're looking at that policy. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You've got Dr. Park, textbook adoption will be.
All right. I closed it up. Okay, so textbook adoption. This year, our state textbook adoption policy or procedures included Section C, Science, Fine Arts, AV, Technology, Communications, Health, and PE. So previously at the November board meeting, you approved the committees that we had to submit to the state. They have completed they've come in and taken an oath. They've completed textbook adoption committee training. They have been invited to review all of the materials and had electronic access to materials. And these committees included parent, community stakeholders, teachers. If we had a content area supervisor, they all included those people to get good feedback on the committee. We've also conducted a survey of the options for teachers to get their feedback, and then we've met with all the principals to also discuss the options. So for the state of Tennessee, they give you the option to adopt and to adopt with intent to purchase. And because we have some poor options, I would say right now, because our science textbooks have not been updated in a really long time, we are wanting to adopt with intent to purchase. And that means that we will go ahead and try to purchase this year. So what we are doing now is we are submitting a blanket adoption. A blanket adoption is the option that the state of Tennessee allows us to have as a school district, where we say, okay, we would like to go with this option, but we can change it after a year if this is not meeting our needs after we get a state test that's developed in science and we see that something else would be more aligned to it. So we are requesting to just have a blanket adoption with intent to purchase. So that means we can have, at a fixed rate, we have the flexibility to go in and change what our option is based on teacher and parent feedback. And so that's what we're requesting to have approved tonight with textbook adoption. And then if you all agree to it at the board meeting, then we will submit the required form that says blanket textbook adoption for all of the areas.
So it leaves our options open as we go through this process and see a test that's fully developed.
On the Excel sheet, there were a lot of online opportunities. Is that what we're shifting to?
That's what we would like to shift to because it aligns with our strategic plan and our blended learning initiative for the district. So something that is a consideration was when we went out and met with the principals to say, do you think if we went with this elementary, because our one-to-one initiative of blended learning is 612, do you think you have the devices to support it? And then do you think it would be something that's a viable option? And the main point that I want to have with our textbook adoptions is I don't want to have electronic resources used elementary. Let's go back to traditional textbook middle school and then have just different options at the high school. I'd like for it to be continuous and to align with our strategic plan. And so that's the main goal for us. And the teachers have chosen.
So to answer your question,
Right.
yes, that's why when we said we wanted to go one-to-one,
That's
one of those
awesome.
options was to have digital options so that when the state test changes, we're not stuck with a book that is outdated and doesn't match the change in curriculum.
It's awesome. Great. I see the only books we have are song books.
That's right.
I noticed that. Okay, great.
Any other questions?
Was that, and you might be getting to this next, but was that part of the survey for the parents and the teachers so that all of that comes into just getting a feel for electronic versus? Okay.
They completed a rubric for the textbook adoption committees, and then they had open access to where there was a public hearing held at Houston High School that anybody could come in and review that was not on the committee to review the materials. And then we've again gone out and conducted an additional survey of all the teachers in the content areas to ask what their thoughts are on it. We've even considered looking at the high school level. Some of these options come with a book, and so some of them don't come with a book, but some of them do. So
Right.
we also explored the option of having a classroom set of bound textbooks with the online, and that continues our movement with the blended learning because now they use Schoology for the online platform, and we've got several teachers, especially our foreign language teachers at the high school, have online access, and so they try to blend those two, and I think it's been really successful. So we'd like to continue that. 21st century.
Anything else? Thank you, Dr. Clark. Are you next?
You
too?
stay up here, stay up here. Miscellaneous budget amendments.
Okay. Change folders. Okay.
You're our designee tonight?
These are in my world, so
Yes,
Okay.
they're-
we're going to talk about these. Budget amendment number 28. This is Title I budget amendment. So the state goes through several rounds of allocations for us. You have a preliminary allocation where they don't have the actual amount, and typically the state uses a funding formula where it's 20% less than what was previously funded. So that's what we originally brought to the board with the budget. Then they came back and said that we are getting additional funds, and that's where the 2.2 million came in for Title I. And so we submitted a budget for that, and then they came back and said, okay, well, we're cutting you 9,000 out of that 2.2 million. So we said, all right, that's fine. We'll go back and revise again. And when we did that, that's what you're going to see on this Title I budget amendment. And you'll see that there were a few changes made, just requested changes, because at this point, we've had the money out at the schools. We know what they originally budgeted versus where their needs finally settled for this year. So you'll see some of the changes in the amounts and several things shifted around. For example, the biggest one would be the first line item, teachers. So we had originally budgeted to have an interventionist type Title I facilitator at each school. And there was no need to do that when you don't get final approval from the state until February. So we've changed that back to being a stipend position for this year. So you'll see that for teachers' salaries, you'll see a big change there to reduce that amount. And then other salaries and wages, you'll see has increased a little bit. That's where we have after-school tutoring and stipend positions at the schools. So there are just a few things. The benefits have shifted also with that. Instructional equipment, you'll see that some of the schools moved the money that they had originally had for the full-time or FTE position. They moved it to technology to continue to purchase more technology for the school. That's a great purchase using federal funds because you don't have to give it back or take it away because of the depreciation. So
It's not a recurring.
Yeah, it's not recurring, so it's a really good use of money to tie into what our strategic plan is. And then you'll see going through, we've had a little bit of change, adding a little bit more money in in-service staff development. We are sending a lot of teachers to Eureka training in New Orleans this year. We are sending some groups to the curriculum conference, ASCD, next week. So we've got several options going on that we're excited about. We've got some expeditionary learning, professional development that we're going to have teachers there to or attend as well. So we're excited about that. So those are our biggest changes in that budget.
And how do teachers just say they have an interest in that, or how do y'all decide?
So we really let the principals, each principal is leading a professional development committee at their school for that school level. They have a school level PD plan that they submitted this year. And so they are aligning it with their school needs and also feedback from a PD survey that we administer every year. So we're about to gear up to get on our second PD survey, or the second one since I've been here, but it's our second official PD survey for the district. And it'll be applicable for next year. So it's going to show us needs that weren't met this year, but areas so that we can help address flex days and have plans for that. So, but a teacher can come to the principal and say, I've got a need in this area. And we have some teachers that are going as single people to a conference that's going to be in their specific area of need. So we have a lot of options for that.
Other questions on Title I funding? Or I guess we can move to Title II.
Title II is easy. We had originally, this is where we have one FTE coming out of Title II. This is Shamira Davis with she does our evaluations and professional learning, professional development supervisor. And originally we had her coming out partially out of Title II and out of district. Then we moved her to be 100% because we carry over. We were dead, and then they cut our final allocation back. So you'll see a few changes there. And where we reduced the money was other contracted services. This is where we have paid for our speaker for DLD for February. So his fee was not as much as what was in this budget. So then we were able to cut money there. And then also we went in and made some changes in the in-service staff development total. So you'll see that there, in addition there. So we can send additional people outside of what the schools are sending using the Title I money to the conferences.
Title III.
Title III, there it is, I can just tell you about it. Title III, we just shifted some money from professional development to instructional supplies and materials. There are a few recurring costs with our Title III program that we pay for out of this grant, and they're usually online sources for our students. And it's very important, since the state is requiring individual education plans for EL students, that we have these personalized options for them. And so we didn't have approval from the state because of the late release of funding. So we didn't have approval to send the teachers that we were going to send in first semester. So there was money sitting there. We didn't want it to be rollover because you don't necessarily get all that money back. So we shifted it around to where it will cover recurring costs that will be renewed before this upcoming year.
And 31. So I'm filling in for Ms. Huffman. This is also a minor change. You're seeing an increase in revenue. That's the $985. And so it's additional funding for a preschool program. And it's going to be used for supplies for the preschool classroom.
And then 32, CTE teachers. This is just an account coding change. These teachers are CTE teachers, and they were not put under that account for that function. They were included under your regular instruction function. So it's just moving them for the account coding. It's not any additional funds. It's just changing the funding.
Changing where they're located in the budget.
Any questions on the budget amendments? You're staying?
Yes.
One more.
One more.
Okay, next item on our agenda is purchase lease of teacher laptops, student laptops, and iPads.
Can you all stand by the... Mr. Pierce, you might as well stand with him.
So it's time to do the next round of purchasing for the laptops. We're doing the iPads for 6th graders and the laptops for 9th graders. This will actually be our full implementation. So from here on out, every year we'll be purchasing iPads for 6th graders and laptops for 9th graders, and they'll carry that throughout their high school or middle school careers. We've been talking with we have a little committee, Dr. Park and Mr. Pierce and Mr. Manuel and Mr. Jones, who have been thinking of different ways that we could possibly take care of this purchase to help with funds next year. So there's a possibility that instead of entering another lease or getting a loan, we can just purchase these outright, and Mr. Mayor's going to talk about that.
Okay. So in looking at this process, and we're trying to figure out how to fund this, one of the options that we've had in the past is to enter in a lease agreement with the city. Because we can't take on debt, they're the ones who essentially take on that debt for us. And so that was one of the funding options that we had, was to have them go out and borrow the money for us. And they do get a good interest rate, and then we pay them back for the devices. But because it is a very involved process, and the timing to get the devices in, and also image them, Mr. Pierce will talk about the deployment portion, it would be our recommendation to go ahead and purchase those up front. One of the things that it does for us is, and we'll talk about how we want to fund that, those devices, is it does free up money for us. So because we have $200,000 that are allocated for this every single year, once we have those purchased outright, that money can be used. So if when we get ready to open the new school, for example, in non-recurring costs. So if we need extra library books, if there are extra supplies that we need to buy, anything, if we need extra desks, devices at the school, it allows us that flexibility to have that money that was budgeted for computers for lease payments towards whatever the board decides we need to spend that money on. And Mr. Jones worked to look at how could we do this if we were going to do a purchase. So if you look at the budget amendment that is attached to it, Budget Amendment 33, real quick. We do have two areas where we do have increases in projected revenue. It's actually not projected anymore, in revenue. So one of the areas that, and the way that we budget fiscally conservatively, is that usually when we see increases, we don't budget for those with a recurring cost. So one of those, for example, is the fact that if you've seen your property taxes, they have gone up. So the city has to pay us, the equivalent of the property tax. And so you'll see that one of those ways that we pay for that is that increase that we've seen in the property tax revenue from the city. It moved from approximately 2.1 million a year to 2.4 million a year that we receive from the city, is to use that change in funding towards going ahead and just buying those devices. And like I said, that money is going to be there every year, that recurring money from the city and that maintenance of effort. Would use that change this year to pay for those devices. The other is, if you know how our funding works, we get funded based on our student attendance, that ADA. So there's a settling up at the end of the year through that BEP formula. So we're seeing that, and so there is a positive variance that we see there. And so we would be using $247,000 from the maintenance of effort money from the city. That's the increase in property taxes. And we would be using $398,000 from our increases in BEP based on our attendance for our students. So use that funding to go ahead and buy the devices outright instead of leasing them. That would be our recommendation. And so,
one thing I failed to mention is it's not just the student devices. We're actually on the 4th year of teacher devices. So this is our time we usually refresh those. So we'll be refreshing them with teacher laptops as well.
So Mr. Pierce can talk about our timeline.
Yeah, so it's the perfect storm of timing. Well, we need to try to move forward as fast as we can with this. We've got, as mentioned, teacher laptops coming up for renewal. That's a big process for us. It's really, I would argue, one of the biggest events that we do in technology, period, because there's getting ready just to hand out and we're transferring the data, which is really the mantra. Teachers value their data. It's important. So that's that takes on its own a month-long process after we get the devices ready to do that. The second is, thank you, Apple. They have changed their operating system so that we can no longer do our traditional imaging setup that we used to do. And that may make no sense to you, but what we would normally do in the past is you set up one machine exactly how you want it. You want it to be for everybody. Take an image of that machine and you apply that to everything else. Well, their operating system won't allow us to do that anymore. So now every device has to have the operating system installed, and all the software put on, all the firmware, which is the stuff that makes the button to click. Basically, it's a more time-consuming process. And they did that from a security standpoint to make the system more secure. So all that combined, plus just the sheer volume of devices that we're going to be turning over this summer. We've got 1,500 devices roughly coming in new, in addition to about 2,000 that are already out there to update and get ready for the students over the summer for next year. Yeah, we're getting pressure time, so I'm going to be sweating a little bit here.
So one of the things that helps us if we purchase outright, the process of getting this approved versus going through the city's funding mechanism to get a lease for this. If you think about waiting for the BMA to then have their meeting to get their approval, just know that it would add several months to the process.
And it's always a catch because you can't quote technology items too far in advance because it changes so fast. So we can't really go back to gaming and say, okay, here are the devices you're going to purchase for the summer because Apple changes their, it's not a bad thing. It just works against us because of the speed of technology, the way that it moves. We just can't start the process as far back as we would like to initially from a strictly a budget perspective.
So could you walk us through this page?
Yeah, so no, with that though, that's not what we're looking at. So we were sharing all the documents. Mr. Jones was sharing everything that we were looking at. So what he was saying, we were looking for different funding options to pay for this. So one of the things that Dr. Park was looking at and Mr. Jones was looking at, could we use federal funds to pay for that? So I'll let Dr. Park talk about
Similar to
some of the
what we've
concerns
already
of
done
using it. Yes.
This year is we've purchased the MacBooks for the 11th grade students to take their online state testing with for this year, and then they will be there as a grade level purchase for next year. And again, it goes back to the good use of federal funds because this is an investment that can be used for our students immediate. It aligns with our strategic plan goals of blended learning. And so what we are looking at now is trying to not blend technically, but to partner our funds, like federal funds with district funds to make sure that we're getting the bang for our buck and that we get these devices in the hands of our students at the beginning of school, not waiting until if we adopt online science textbook materials, and we don't have devices for our students to use them, then that's not really a very successful approach to that. So going through this process, what we can do is we do have some money set aside already in federal funds for Riverdale to cover their 6th grade iPad purchases. So that's something that we are looking at. And any additional funds that we see that we cannot spend, we might have another budget revision to where we move that and can utilize those funds to where we're not turning money back in, that we're using it for our students. So that's something that we're looking at.
Yes.
That would cover the Houston Middle 6th grade. So the worksheet that I think you are seeing that Mr. Jones uploaded into the TSBA site is just the planning where we discussed it to look at the possible options. But it's not that 253,000, I think.
It's not an accurate
It-
number.
It could be possible, but I don't know because we have to get and look and see after these budget amendments go through.
And the other,
Everybody's been waiting.
and the other concern that Dr. Park has to be aware of is we have to be careful that we're supplementing, not supplanting, which means that if we have a one-to-one initiative, for example, that we have planned to use our general fund money for, the goal is to not then offset that with the, that federal funding. So that's one of her concerns and her goals with that funding. So this was just what they were going through to show you the different options that they were trying to look at to fund this
Right,
process.
and I'm sorry, I wasn't talking about the federal, because I get that part, is the purchase and then the Apple lease and the city loan. Are those, are the Apple lease and the city loan dollar amounts, are those what is over the 3 years that we would be paying?
That's the total amount, so you divide that by 3.
Okay, so that would be an annual of about 500,000 that we'd be spending each year?
If you're taking the...
If you're doing the lease.
You're taking
If
the
you're-
total, yeah.
Yeah, well, 1 point.
About 15, about
If you say
1.5 million.
1.5, yeah,
Right.
round
Okay,
up.
yeah, just rounding, so, and so we would, and I'm leaving the timing off, because I definitely know that's a huge ordeal, but I'm just trying to make sure from a financial perspective. So what we would be doing is having $500,000 to spend a year on a consistent basis versus a 1.5 initial outlay, is that fair?
That's correct.
To say? A concern I have when you don't go off, when you give up the leases is $1.5 million is a lot of money to come up with, and technology changes so rapidly. Is when we look at our outlay of cash going forward, will we be in a position, when do we have to start, I guess, getting, buying new iPads and buying new laptops? Next year, do we have to start, because we started our one-to-one 3
Right,
years
so-
ago? So what is our turn on that? Does that make sense?
And the way it actually can work out is if we're able to do this year, and the next year, if we're able to help out with some different funds, we have some different ideas, then we should be at a place where instead of having 3 sets of loans, so you're getting devices every year, right? Instead of having 3 sets of loans that's going to equal the same amount, we're going to have the money to pay it outright. It's going to be the same amount either way. So either we're going to pay the lump sum and buy them out, or I'm going to have 3 different leases that equal the same amount.
So,
So
yeah,
that's-
but, so I'll, so.
Does that make- yeah.
To answer your question first.
So what is our total lease payment
So
now?
for us, well, I don't know the
I
total.
mean,
We'd have to-
well, I mean, in theory, it would
Because
be about $1
they're
million.
different accounts, because we have the teacher laptops, we have the student laptops. So I know that, what did you have, approximately 200,000 that was budgeted in that one?
For
That
the,
was for the teacher.
that's for
yes,
teachers.
For the teacher laptops.
So it's about 577 for the devices.
So about 577. We leave that money budgeted, because
Okay.
one of the things that we have to be careful of, and this is what we would do when we go through the budget process, is we don't want to spend that money on a recurring cost. So that's when I was open talking about how do we use that money. So how have we built a $13 million reserve, or probably a $13 million reserve at the end of this year? This is one of the ways that we do that. So we still have money for this one-to-one initiative. So as we were phasing that in, that money is rolling into our savings account. The other thing we could use it for, like I said, is non-recurring costs. So as we open a new school, as we come online with different programs, can we use that for supplies? Can we use that for textbooks? Making sure that we're not hiring people or adding positions with that funding. That's what that money does. It sits there as a placeholder so that when we get ready 5 years from now to re-up that, we can go with a lease option at that time, or we could do, save it up and
Do the
plan
same
to
thing we're doing now.
do the same thing that we're doing now.
So what is our, I don't even know the term for it, where you upgrade? what is our upgrade timing? Like, when would, like the
For the teacher
ninth graders
laptops,
who,
or-
the ninth graders who got laptops, or the teachers who are getting laptops, so when would they expect to get a new laptop?
Teachers are typically on a 4-year schedule right
Okay.
now. That's open to change in the future,
I
obviously.
think that's my concern.
Yeah.
But that 200,000 will stay in there every year for that. And
So we
that's the
save,
other-
we save that money for that purpose. We're not
Well,
going
yeah,
to
no,
spend
no,
it,
I agree.
right?
I'm just trying to get, and so what about the laptops for the kids?
So, when I said 537, that's separate from 270. So
Absolutely,
that's-
absolutely.
So it'll be every year, we'll be buying ninth grade laptops. They'll keep them till their senior year, and then we can sell them.
I see what you're saying.
We can
Okay,
sell
so
them.
they stay
So
with
we're-
that group.
We're buying laptops every year for ninth graders, and they keep them. And we're buying iPads every year for sixth
So
graders.
we're not
and then we
buying
sell them
everything
at the end.
outright one year. We're always
Yeah,
buying
in
it.
the cycle, we're selling.
The only.
Selling what you have, and
The only
then-
group in which we will be buying outright and every 4 years is the teachers. And you're looking at about 100 of them.
Or you could decide at that point to start the lease process in 4 years. But yes, I'm saying you can go either way in 4 years.
No,
Yes.
100, what do you mean 100?
What?
But how many teachers do we have? I mean, I was looking here.
525, that's what it says for laptops.
Where are they? Right here? Okay, sorry, I looked at
That's
the wrong,
okay.
I looked at the wrong line. 525 MacBook Airs for teachers. So every 4 years, we potentially will be purchasing 525.
Yes.
And that's the same, where we'll sell, we can sell off the devices, the used devices.
To offset that.
In the past, we would roll those down into carts, but now we're
Right.
doing one program.
Yeah, that's what I remembered in the past, is we rolled them into
Now,
cards.
now we can offset some of the costs, hopefully, with another resale process.
Okay. What about in the elementary level?
So we still have the board approved 180,000. It's 60,000 per school for devices every year. So that's still in there as well.
Okay.
So we're
So
still
every
that's
year
not
we're upgrading.
impacted.
That is not impacted.
So
And
they
we're
can,
upgrading carts.
I'm just making sure
Right.
we're hitting all the age
Right.
And does the
levels here.
60,000 upgrade the carts, or is that in addition to upgrading the carts?
No, that's
That's purchasing new
That is
devices.
for new
And so
devices.
if there's any devices that are, kind of outdated, we can sell those off. But I think right now they're using everything. So I think we're okay.
It's
They got
important
it.
because next year, online testing will be mandatory from
Right.
fifth through eighth grade.
Mm.
And so
Right.
our fifth grade at the elementary schools, that's another discussion we've had is.
Having
are we
reliable.
testing on the same type of device? And now we'll be working with those. So
Mhm.
I just don't want us to get in a position where in 4 years, we don't have the budget to
Yeah. Yes.
give our teachers the technology that they need in order to do the blended learning they need to do with the materials they're provided.
And so that's what I'm saying.
That's my only concern, is that we make sure that we're on top of that.
We do. We
And so you have
we
the
leave it as a
200,000.
placeholder, and that, once again, that's how we have built reserve, is by not spending that
Okay,
that
so
funding.
will that be tagged?
Yes,
the
it is,
budget that we
it
see
is
when
in
we
it,
see the-
it is
Right.
budgeted in that account, yes,
And then we'll just see it not spent.
yes.
So it would be a
It'll just-
line item that would be.
Or we will be coming with a budget amendment to the board to say, hey, we want to spend this money on X, will you let us spend this money?
Okay.
So, yeah, but it is,
But
it
it's not
sits,
there.
it lives in that
We
account.
have to approve that, so that would be a.
Yeah, they
But it's
can't
just
do
for that
without
year.
approval.
No,
It'll,
I'm just saying.
it just
So you
moves
don't
it that
want
year,
to,
but it
that's
stays in
what
that
we
line.
Then we just say no.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a line item in the budget.
I'm just making sure, I just want us, it's that budgeting. Again, I've been in districts where, yes, this is great, yay, 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 and then the teachers have a 9-year-old computer. I don't want to have our teachers that.
Not us.
And it's similar to what we do, when you see the budget outline and you
Right.
look at it for this year, it's
Right.
under the object number 722, which is instructional equipment. So you'll be able to see what
That
that
grew.
money was. And it's there every year. So we do the same thing with textbooks. We put a certain amount in there every year. Last year was a small textbook adoption year, so we only had CPE programs go through adoption.
Mhm.
And so we still had the same large number allotted there that went to reserves, which helps us. But we hold it there because this year during science, K-12, it's a huge adoption. And so
Yes.
if we had to go back and
So you
say
use all that
we needed to
money.
pull from reserves, it's because if we saved it. the
But
year
we saved
before.
it.
So it's.
Well, and maybe that's what would be helpful too, is when we go through the budget, when we get into our budget meeting, is, I know that we got kind of a high-level look at the reserve, is, because I hadn't thought about the reserve that way, is that there are items tagged in the reserve
Right.
that are kind of reserved, in theory, right? Like the 200,000 that would be rolling forward, is making sure that we understand how much, because I think that would be good for us to understand what is the untouchable. You talked about, we want to have this kind of amount saved just because. Then you
Yes.
have some that we might want to reserve for the new school. But then how do we ensure that we're looking at us knowing how much is in the reserve that is tagged for these different items, so that we make sure as we're, just for mine, you know it, y'all know it, I don't know it, when we sit down to say, let's pull this out of the reserve, that we know what is really untouchable.
Right.
Right.
Because I think if,
That's my
seeing that, then I think it makes sense, because you're rolling it up just
Yes.
like we do with the savings account. You know, you save it for the rainy day, and then you can use it all. But it's making sure that that's tagged.
Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Clark. All right, are you sure you're done? You don't want to do the air handler and replacement of that?
I'm done.
You're good?
Mr. Kathy.
Mr. Kathy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This item is, go through a brief recap, the damages that happened over Christmas break due to pipes freezing at Riverdale for the boiler chiller system. We were able to get everything up and running on the heat side, but it's starting to get warm outside now. And on the AC side, we're going to have to do temporary measures to get us to the summer when this work can actually take place. We do have an insurance claim in with the TML for this. I've not heard back on what the actual award would be, but I would expect for it to be the full amount, but we don't have that verified yet. But this is to purchase and install the 15 replacement unit ventilators. This is not a common item because it's just not a common way of doing heating and air conditioning anymore. So there's an 8-week lead time on materials, which means that if you guys approve this tonight, we will be putting in a purchase order tomorrow and getting the order in so that we can have the materials in place by the beginning of the summer to complete the work. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
Any questions?
So if we get this, I'm sorry. So if we get this in by the beginning of summer, what good is it?
Well, for the next school year, for getting this in by the beginning of the summer, what we're going to do is put the same temporary units that we've had in place to get us to the end of the school year.
We're paying a monthly lease to
That
heat,
was my question.
to
What are we
heat
doing
those
in the
classrooms
meantime?
right now.
We're putting in the temporary units that we had to put in for heat for the 3 classrooms that we never got back up and running. So we'll be putting in more of those just to get us to the end of the school year. We waited on this because we wanted the board to have the discussion about the whole boiler chiller. We got our guidance there that it's just too big, and I know the CIP item is next, so I'm jumping ahead, but that could be an item, it's a big ticket item that we don't currently have funded or budgeted. That could be something that we could look at for the future. But this is just to get us back to operating on the existing system.
How many classrooms are impacted right now?
15.
15, okay,
The
without
fif-
air, okay.
15 without air, that
Okay.
we're having to put temporary measures in
Any
place for.
other areas or just those classrooms?
Just those
Okay.
classrooms.
For the moment. Fingers crossed.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other questions?
If we get the approval of the boiler and chiller, I know it's a big ticket item, but how long will that take to replace?
It's a good question. The cost estimates are all over the board. Our cost estimates are in the low to mid $2 million. The architects and engineers put it closer to $3 million. If we did get the funding for it, I would be overly optimistic to think we could get it done by this summer, because we would still have to go through the entire process of putting the specifications together, getting the bid package out. This is not one that we could do through a cooperative. We would have to bid it because of the unique nature of the work. And
That was, and I'll clarify, that was really the hard decision point for Mr. Kathy, is we're getting the funding from the insurance to pay for these repairs, but timeline-wise, could we get, if we get this funding from the city for this project, or if we receive funding for this, could we get it done by the summer? We don't see any way possible that we could. So then the question becomes, do we go a year without classrooms with heat and air in those locations, or do we go ahead and make those fixes knowing that we could come back and do a chiller boiler replacement? So that,
Can we do away with the chiller and just put rooftop units?
that's what I want to do. That's the idea. Believe me, I don't take pleasure in putting $300,000 into a system that we agree is not the best system. It's not a recommendation I'm thrilled to bring, but it's the one we have right now. Yes, that's what I want to do. I want to get rid of the boiler, get rid of the chiller, replace it with rooftop units. But that, That's an extensive amount of work. You've got the
Is
rooftop.
that the $2 million price there?
Yes, ma'am. The architects and engineers think it's closer to $3 million.
And the
Because that goes with all the duct work and all the
and
wiring.
that's the good
and
thing is when they,
yeah.
yes, when they
Mhm.
do it, they're gonna rip out the ceiling grid.
Mhm.
And since they're taking out the ceiling grid, you put in whole new ceiling grid, you put in LED lighting, you do your
You're checking off
wiring at
multiple
that time.
boxes on,
Right.
on the deferred maintenance list, and you've got asbestos remediation that you had to do as well during that project, so that's what drives it up. Be checking several boxes. I understand the funding's not there now, but we've got to get them at least operable, and then hopefully in the future we can do this, because I know you guys get the parent complaints. I get them too, and I hate telling our parents they're really not. There's nothing that we can do to really fix it with the current system. We just have to gauge when the weather's going to change for the most part, and it's really hard when you have temperatures swinging all the way from 30 to 70 in any given week or two right now to
Any given day.
any given day. So,
I got you. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Cathy.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Next is the CIP list. Mr. Manuel?
And so do they have that form in their folders?
Yes, they do.
So I sent the email that said we had some miscommunication on really what we need to do with our CIP list. So just a reminder of the process that we went through. We do have a facilities committee that looks at our 5-year facilities plan, and they had prioritized our items. The request for me, and I think for this board, the goal for this board was to come up with the marching orders. So what do we need to go to the city for and say, these are our top priorities that we have? So we listed the 5 that y'all all had consensus on. All of y'all ranked those in your top 5 items, and that's that one paper that has the, I think it has the GM. Does it look like this? I don't know if I have it. Yeah, I think so. So it looks like this. So the request, and I think the real decision point for the board at this point, and I'll hand it over to Ms. Landers, is to decide what do you want me to say to the FAC when we go and present to them.
Well, can we agree on what the dollars are for each of these
That was
items?
going to be my question, what is the
There's-
dollars?
There isn't. So the challenge with some of these, we do have some projected amounts, but especially with the top 3, it depends on what our final analysis is, and so that will take an architect. So I can tell you right now that with the school safety, we're going out, we're meeting with the SWAT team at each of the schools. So
Right,
we're
right.
going through in the next few weeks that's what we've been doing, Mr. Bland, Mr. Cathy, and myself, and Lieutenant Shield. And so Dogwood doing an entry that is a controlled entry, so we have that sealed. Houston Middle School, a controlled entry. Houston High School, putting a door in the side that brings parents directly into the office. Fencing at Houston High School, those are all projects for us. And until we finish that process, we are going to have to get architects to look at what is it going to take, the structure, in each of those facilities. It's hard to put a number on those projects, but no, in the early discussions that we had, we have identified those as key issues in our district that would help control access to our schools. As far as dollars amounts on these projects, and Ms. Parker, we were talking about this today, this could range, each of these projects could range from $15,000 to $100,000 depending.
And I think some of us are interested in going to the safety summit that TSBA
Yes.
is putting on, so we really don't,
Right.
I wouldn't even know what right now to even
Well,
tag to this.
Exactly, and that's where I was going to get, because I think part of this conversation is not only it's basically what we want to take to the FAC in
Yes.
theory next week, right? We won't have a dollar amount. So is it as simple as saying, we're still investigating it, we don't have a dollar, but know that this would be our #1 priority when we come back to you? And do we have an option to come back to them? I mean, I'm questioning, do we have to go to them with a number? If we don't have a number, I know that's very hard. So how would we handle that?
And I think that's a discussion for the board. I could easily say that we could spend $200,000 to $300,000 on safety upgrades at our schools as far as locations and secure entrances at our schools. I think we could have a placeholder amount, at least get us started
That's
on.
what I was curious, is if we could. if we
Would
could
that be
ballpark.
enough, do you think, or is that?
Mr. Cathy, you're sitting behind the podium where I can't see you.
The one that I saw on the top of the list, I think we do have a real number on, is the Riverdale Boiler Chiller. I think that we're in the ballpark there.
2 to 3 million?
I would aim higher on the 3
3
million
million,
number.
yeah,
If it
that's what I
comes in
wrote
less
down.
than that,
Yeah.
everybody can do a happy dance. The others are just, you would have to do them the way that we've done Dogwood's ADA for the past few years. That was just a number that Fleming put in there. Until you really go through and analyze, you can spend millions of dollars on ADA, but how it normally works is you get an architecture and engineering firm on board, you analyze everything that can be done with ADA, realize it's a few $1,000,000, you pick priorities with the budgets that you have, and you do the work that can be done. Security is the same. I mean, we could talk about hundreds of different things, more cameras, different front entrances, more badge readers on doors. And so with that list, as you develop it, those are all dollars that add or subtract. It's if the board wants to go to the FAC with a number, it's going to have to be a placeholder number at this point. We just haven't done the full analysis to put an accurate dollar sign on that.
So you and Ms. Parker were talking earlier, and it was ranging, I mean, you were just kind of spitballing.
She asked the exact same question as
$15,000 to
what could.
$100,000. What if we were to say, again, this is a spitball number, $100,000 a school, five schools, $500,000, and have that as your place for safety. Have that as your placeholder. And if we're highballing the boiler chiller at $3 million, and if it comes in less, then we have that additional funding we could push to safety as needed, if needed. Because I think you're going to see.
And we could always spend, because the issue that we have is we inherited, Mr. Bland has been working hard on this, a camera system that was
Right.
Outdated. And so every year we get a Safe Schools grant of approximately $30,000 that he's using to upgrade our camera systems, working with Mr. Pierce. I'm not leaving you out too, Mr. Pierce. But yes, they've been working on the upgrading our
Right.
camera systems. And so easily we could spend that at the schools, even if we're not doing the entrances.
That's why I'm thinking if we can say right now, we are exploring our options. But this is, we would estimate very conservatively
$100,000
per school, with the understanding that some schools may need more and some schools may need less. Like Farmington's not going to need a new entrance.
That's correct.
But Dogwood will. Or
Houston
Riverdale
Middle
won't
School.
need a new entrance, but Houston Middle will.
That's right. And the high school has multiple.
Yes.
So then you
Right.
have to deal with
Fencing
what that, and
Yes.
I'm just trying to help us.
That's an
So
easy,
I
I think
think
that's a
that's-
good, that is a very good conservative placeholder.
So I think the chair's hearing everyone would feel comfortable to have a fiscal placeholder
Of
when we go.
500,000.
Well, I would say from the conversation for all 5 projects.
well, I would say, take them one at a time. I'd say safety, yes, the 500,000 I think is very reasonable. I think, given Mr. Cathy's discussion, I think the 3 million seems reasonable. I still have heartburn over the next 3 as to prioritization. I know that the ceiling tile at Farmington, it doesn't look good, it doesn't feel good, but there's so many other things that I think, you know, our bathrooms are in such disrepair that I think as much as we would get out of it, if we could take money, and instead of focusing on one school for ADA, is there a potential that we could say, let's look at all of our bathrooms and get them ADA compliant and redo them at the same time? Would that be more bang for our buck as far as parent and student satisfaction? I just can't get excited about ceiling tile.
Well, the facilities committee put the Dogwood ADA on there because Dogwood was never supposed, when Shelby County built Dogwood was never supposed to have handicapped children. Now we do.
Right.
So.
The need is greater there.
The need is greater there than any of our schools. We had a price tag on the FAC of $600,000. We can put that as a placeholder. And that is just looking at the restrooms. That's not even looking at the fountains. That's not changing the hardware on the doors. That's not really doing anything other than the restrooms.
But, and I know y'all can change this, but all of y'all rank these as your top 5?
Yes.
In order? These were.
Now, I wouldn't even.
I would not have put FES as top 5.
I wouldn't even put.
I put my bathrooms, I think, as 3. The majority did. I would say the majority
The
did.
majority did. This was the majority ranking.
Yes, the majority ranking.
I wouldn't even add the high school painting and the ceiling tile because they've already gone out for bid, and I do believe the district has the money to pay for those in our CIP.
Mr. Cappy?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have the money to pay for those two?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so those.
So I would just go with the top three and rank those. And I don't care how you rank them. The FAC's gonna rank them.
What is the FEC, what is the ceiling tile gonna cost? Is it only 400,000?
Well,
That's not
last year when we went out to bid, it was 723,000, and that number was too high, so we didn't do it, so.
And we only had one
And we
respondent.
only had one contractor respond to the bid. So this year, we've done our best to drum up contractor interest within the rules. And we have we put the bid package out last week along with the Houston High Painting bid package. We have our mandatory pre-bid meeting on Wednesday this week for the ceiling tile grid and Thursday for the painting. So I have a lot better idea how much interest there is because it's mandatory. So if you don't attend, you can't bid the project.
Okay, so what you're saying, Lisa, just to make sure I'm hearing correctly, is the Dogwood ADA at $600,000 is the facilities committee's idea would be that this would be to upgrade their bathrooms to ADA compliant.
That's correct. Only the bathrooms.
Only the bathrooms. And they have how many banks of bathrooms? They have 4 banks?
Four banks of student bathrooms
4
and
banks
then
of-
one bank of teacher bathrooms.
Right. Right, well, yeah, 2 bathrooms, yeah.
But it would only be the student ones as far as.
Right, because the other ones don't need them. Okay. So we could see this as moving in the direction of new bathrooms each year for a different.
Yes.
Same way they're doing painting each year they're doing the school, and I guess the ceiling tiles really goes along with the painting. Once they paint the walls, they would like to get rid of all the stained
Right.
tiles.
Right. I totally understand it. I'm just trying to think through, it would really be nice.
Well, if
For to have
it's the same, if it's gonna be
bathrooms.
about the same amount, should we give the school the choice, ceiling tiles or new bathrooms? I'm just saying, I mean, I just think from a usability perspective, I just feel like, and I agree with you, and I think painting every year, but should bathrooms come before ceiling tile? Should it be painting, bathroom, ceiling tile, and we get on that rotation from how it touches the students, how it touches the teachers, how it touches the parents, and we're looking at it being about the same amount of money. I'm just throwing that out there to say.
I think I'm not for either or at this
Sure,
point.
sure.
I think that Mr. Cathy will have better ideas next week on if there are more bidders for the tile. It could be there's not going to be a bidder. It could be that maybe another 700,000, and I don't think we're going to be spending that kind of money. So I think we'd have a better idea about ceiling tiles.
But I think,
after this bid meeting.
right, and for this year, for the FEC next week, we're basically, from what I'm hearing, looking at 3 top priorities.
We haven't addressed the addition for the middle school. I mean, when you look at the density that's coming in and you look at the numbers of the middle school, I just think that we should ask, we should let them know, we should.
I think what should be done is we should take our 3 priorities that we have there, school safety, the boiler, the Dogwood ADA, and then as a side note, I think our superintendent should discuss our demographic numbers for Houston Middle to put it out there that we are going to need this in the next year or 2 years.
That's actually what we agreed to at our work session. If you go back and review your notes, we actually talked about ranking our top.
Yeah, I
Deferred
just
maintenance.
wanted to make sure that
Our
it was on our
but
list.
then to mention the
Well,
the very good possibility that we're going to be.
I would go
moving.
strong, I mean, I think the way Linda said it was that we're gonna need something, and I think laying out the numbers and saying we will need funding next year to go forward with a middle school addition, given where we stand. Again, if we're looking at moving towards that optimal, if we're looking at towards keeping our excellence, and with the increase in the development coming up, we just need to make sure that we're staying ahead of the game and being proactive. I would be stronger in the message, because I think we kind of said something last year about needing middle school, but I don't necessarily know that it was heard, given some of the comments from city officials.
I think we're all in agreement that these first 3 are what we want to address, and then the superintendent will discuss the future needs.
Because that'll be part of my presentation
Hard
again, to say,
presentation.
this is coming.
A hard push.
This is real,
Hard
this is
push.
coming.
Yes, and if you would like
He's
to
gonna
give
have
us
the
money
data
ahead of
to pass
time,
it
because we could get started. I mean, I don't think that it ever hurts to ask. I mean, or at least go hard with that to make them think about it, because they're putting priorities out there for, and they have a 5-year plan. So we need to make sure we get a slot in that part of that 5-year
And I
plan.
think that's what the superintendent will do, is allow them to get this in their plan.
We have a 5-year plan too, if you noticed
Yep.
on our CIP.
Yes, we do.
Well, yeah, for CIP, but not for a, yeah. Which is changing, obviously, every year, because we don't have, we're having to shift things.
Are we relatively clear on the CIP list for the FAC?
Yes.
Okay. Next and final item of
Does-
business. What?
I do have one question. Does that, we had it listed as a vote. Do you still see this as a board vote? I don't know what that motion looks
I
like.
don't think so. I
think it'll-
the chair feels like it's not really, we had a work session dedicated to this and we've arrived at consensus. I don't feel like a vote is necessary. We've never voted on a CIP before, so.
Okay. Mr. Grace, we'll need to remove.
I got it.
Is that okay? Is everybody in agreement? Okay. Thank you, Superintendent. Final item of planned business is the Houston High School Field House. Part of our discussion at our last work session was to talk about the community group that came before us this fall to ask for our support and approval to allow them to fundraise on behalf of looking at building a field house and fine arts or band facility at Houston High School. So tonight, this is our final opportunity to ask any questions that you might have before we consider it at our, if you've noticed, it is on the business agenda. I did ask Mike, Perry, and crew to be in attendance tonight in case you had any questions beyond our discussion at our last work session.
So you want to take the lead? So I think the decision point for the board tonight is to take advantage of the work that Mr. Perry and his team have done. They do have a large donor who is wanting to make a substantial contribution to our district. And part of that is that the district matched the funds along with the city. And so I think that'll be the decision point for the board tonight, is to come in to this project as partners to fund that project.
So what would our motion be? Because there's nothing listed for the agenda. I mean, is that what we're here
I have
to
the
talk
motion.
about? Okay.
I have the motion. The chair has the motion to make.
Just quickly,
Would we know what that
the
is?
funding would be coming from the city if they decide to participate, us as a school district, and also the community group would be raising funds as well as a private donor.
So, yes, so the contributions that they've talked about and the donors agreement that he wants us to participate in, he wants to make sure that we're all in this together, that we're all partners at the table for this. And so they would want, it's over a 5-year commitment, so they would want essentially, it's $1 million from the school district, $1 million from the city, and $1 million from this donor, but they do have it subdivided. They have $700,000 towards the field house or athletic complex, which I think is a more appropriate name because lots of groups are going to use this facility, so the athletic complex, and then also $300,000 towards fine arts, so that we're getting both. And so that's what the projects that we would be developing through this agreement. Now this group has also been actively out there raising funds that would go along with this project to make sure that we get all the things, because I think Mr. Nitchwich said this very well, that this is about synergy and this is about a whole project. And part of this whole project is that you've got a paddock, you're changing what is a storage building on this facility into an area where you have concession stands that will really change the whole appearance as people are entering into this project. And so they've been working really hard to get donors out there to really fundraise for this whole vision that they have around this site. So I think it's important to say that it's not just this field house too, it's all of these. So part of what they're doing is making sure that we can get the whole community involved with this project to fund all of this at once. So know that that's their objective and that's what they're working hard to do.
To answer your question, the motion will be the chair does not have it in front of her, that the board approve a donation of $1 million to be divided in increments of $700,000 for the athletic complex, $300,000 for fine arts, to be paid in increments of $200,000 on an annual basis over a 5-year period.
I just want to make sure we knew what we were.
Yeah. Oh, well,
talking about.
it's basically what we discussed at length at our work session. Any questions? That actually is the last item of business on our
And so-
business agenda as well.
So know that I'll have 3 talking points when I go before the FAC. So the first is, here's our top 3 items for our deferred maintenance that we've had on our list for years. They're things that have been identified that are needed in the district. The next is we have growth is concerned. So middle school, we have seen these numbers, our demographer has showed these numbers going up. We know that we're going to need funding to help deal with our middle school numbers. And the third is that we have this opportunity for a community partnership to fund for this field house. So know that there's 3 different areas that we're
Great.
looking
All right,
at.
so
And
we'll
that
put
will
that
be the
in
message
front of
for
them.
FAC.
Okay. Y'all in agreement?
That is much appreciated. Thank you.
Is there any further business?
I had just one question and then one comment. Are we going to have, we had talked about, I know spring break happened and it's been crazy, a meeting before April 11th to go through the budget? We had talked about scheduling a separate meeting to kind of just go through so that we're not.
April 11th will be our budget meeting, correct?
It's a work session
Yeah, we
before
don't
our
have another
meeting.
one planned at this time.
We had talked about having one since we had done it before, because I'm just worried about how much time we'll have.
Is it really, I feel like that there's a work session on the 11th, and then there's a work session / business meeting on the 16th.
There is.
So there's 2, but then also for us, you'll also have all documents prior to. So we have 5 days, we have to give you 5 days in advance for all documents. So know that prior to that.
So maybe I have that wrong on my, so the 11th is just a work
We're
session?
just a work session on the budget. Okay?
I
Yes.
missed that.
And then know that you'll have
I'm sorry.
everything.
Okay.
You'll have,
No.
so we're talking about April 6th, you'll have all documents for
And
that
hang out.
work session by then. Okay.
And then we'll have a follow-up work session before the 16th.
Before the 16th. Okay, sorry, okay.
We're good.
One thing I wanted to bring up is, how we communicate as a board, how we project out our views. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear. We hear about one board member is just one board member, that it's not really the voice of the board until we vote and approve something. And I know Mrs. Parker spoke to the BMA meeting, and I have concerns about the comments coming as the board. It came across to me, and I've gotten several phone calls, that we are in favor of certain developments, or we're in favor of certain items, changing of zoning, and I just would like to have a conversation on, are we going to start taking stances on developments within the city? And if we do, should that be something that comes to the board? We make a resolution, we put to the city, but the comments that were made at the BMA, I don't recall ever having a conversation like that as a board. And the board was referenced, and I think the appearance is that the board is in favor of certain items within the city. And I just don't know that that's what this board has decided.
Is there something in particular?
Well, I mean, just that you were in favor of the development, that you hope that they would do the right thing and do the best thing for the children, and you introduced yourself as a board member, and you spoke even back at the December Planning Commission meeting and said that the board had met with David Duke. You had talked about the items that had been taken care of, or that were being proposed, and that the board was in favor of it. And it wasn't as a person as Lisa Parker, it was as the Germantown board.
At the
December 5th or December 6th Planning Commission meeting.
board meeting, it was a rezoning from R1.
It is for a specific developer, and so the developer was giving the plan of what they would use if it was rezoned. This is what they would do. And the comments, I can pull up the direct minutes if that would be helpful for everyone.
No, I know
can
what
read
it
it.
said.
Well, I'm just, if anybody else needs it. But it was specific to the board. I mean, within your comments, you were very specific to it, including the board. And I just don't recall us as a board.
Okay, if we're gonna police the board, there are some other things that that I have an issue with.
Well, if we could.
Such as you sit on this committee that is the fundraising arm of the field house.
Well,
And you're gonna sit and vote for it tonight, which is a conflict of interest.
I don't sit on that committee, but if we could.
You do? You don't?
I don't, no.
When did you get off of it?
I've never been on it. I've never been on that committee. So what I would think is that if we could go after this one discussion, I'd be more than happy to have that, but I would prefer not to be deferred from what we're talking about here.
To answer the broader question, which time does not allow, and we can absolutely add this at some future point, but you have 3 minutes to discuss this. To answer your question, Ms. Jones, we have power as a board. What we discuss and what we decide is what then becomes the opinion or the thinking of the board. Under the protocol that we have established, that normally is reported out by the chairman at any given term. So that's to answer your question. Now, what occurred in December or?
And in last Monday.
That's point for another discussion. I was not present. I have had the opportunity to read the transcript because you were nice enough to send it to me. So your call here is you either want to discuss it in the next minute and a half, or we can defer this, or...
Well, this is what I would recommend, is I would recommend that we do put it up for discussion, because I think there's a lot of things happening. I think people are looking to the school board for, is there too much going on? Do we have enough funding for what we want? I mean, I just think that the school board, as we're becoming more of an entity, we're going to be looked at to have an opinion. And I think we as a board should have a conversation about when do we go to talk and when do we not. It's no different than political when we say that you can't have a political statement as a board member, but you can as a person. And I think talking as a person is completely fine, but I think when we bring the board into it is where I have the issue. I do believe there were a lot of people at that city meeting. There are a lot of people who were not in favor of what was being talked about there. And it came across that the board is in favor of it and that we were standing up saying, please vote for it. And
I was in favor of it to be rezoned, and that's what the board voted.
That is correct. That is correct. So let's say that we're in favor of zoning, but we as a board did not decide that. You may be in favor of that, but this board has never made an official resolution that we are.
I asked the board to do the right thing for the children because the rezoning.
As a school board member, you did that, not as Lisa Parker. And
board members.
As a board. So what I would say, I would request that our chair send a note to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen that says that there is no official board opinion on zoning or on developments, that any board members that are speaking as individuals, that if we determine a point that we as a board have an official communication, we will announce it as such. But there were people and citizens of Germantown who left that meeting and who are watching that meeting who believe that the board has spoken, and I as a board member do not agree with that.
Well, I believe that it was the right thing to do, because if you put a school in an R1 district, there are no sidewalks and no streetlights.
And Lisa, I'm not going to have that debate, and if we don't have the time, but that's a conversation that we as a board, again,
ladies,
you have the right to have that opinion.
We have arrived
at,
no, you're fine. We've arrived at the appointed time to adjourn. Ms. Jones has made a suggestion. Board's will.
I think it would be wise to send that.
Why don't each of you let me know your feelings after. If you wish to move forward with a broader discussion, not just on this, but some of the other things that have bubbled up, then please let the chair know and we can do that. It will not be at the April 11th meeting because that is dedicated to our budget, but we could put it in another work session as time allows. There being nothing else at this work session, we will stand adjourned. You have less than a minute. Good evening. It's nice to see everyone here this evening. I'm waiting while Ms. Oaf runs to her seat. You're fine. The Germantown Municipal School District Board of Education is officially called to order. I want to welcome each of you here this evening. Hopefully you had a wonderful spring break and ready to get back to work. If for now you would please join the board in a moment of silence. Thank you. Please join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Jones, will you please lead us? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item of business is the approval of our agenda. There has been one correction to the agenda. The vote on the tenured list has been moved to item 9F. Has been moved to this says 9E. Is that correct, 9E? The approval of the tenure list will be item 9E under our board action items. The chair will hear a motion on the approval of the agenda as amended.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oak?
Yes.
Chairman Henderson?
Yes. Thank you. And now for the long-awaited fun part of our agenda, the recognition and awards. Superintendent?
We will start with Mr. Haddo, who's going to recognize some of our incredible teachers.
Thank you, Superintendent Manuel. Good evening, everyone. It is a true honor, and I'm humbled to recognize these three outstanding teachers in our Germantown School District. And I had an epiphany. If you look at the selection process, to give you a back history before I get into the epiphany, is each year the Tennessee Department of Education asks for three outstanding teachers to be recognized through the state of Tennessee. And they do it by grade bands. They do a K through 3, a 5 through 8, and a 9 through 12 teacher to be selected. These three teachers, when I looked at their application process, it dawned on me that all three of them have something, some commonalities that are just simply outstanding. They go above and beyond the classroom. Several of them are lead teachers, several of them are mentoring teachers, several of them, or all of them, are department heads or grade level leaders or something we call professional learning community facilitators. So they go above and beyond the classroom. And when I could, my thought and strategy in introducing these three teachers was to highlight each one of them, but then I thought, well, they have some commonalities that need to be expressed. And then I had a greater thought, that in a perfect world, it would be wonderful to have a first grade teacher who role plays a new student. And the new student comes in behooved by what's being taught. And so the first grade students have to lead this new student, who really is the teacher, with the curriculum that's trying to be expressed. Courtney Berggren does that on a daily basis. She is a creative, out-of-the-box thinker who thrives off one word that I think Albert Einstein really impressed upon us all, and that was curiosity. To engage students with curiosity. And she does that, and she's been recognized. If Courtney's here, please step up. This is Courtney. I'm doing this by memory. There's a good chance I will slip up because I'm not going to read it. I think she's been teaching for 8 years with two different school systems. She's been with us for 4 years.
It's my 5th year.
5th year. And she's all been at Farmington. First grade teacher, she's outstanding, she's child-centered, but I really am impressed with her creativity and how she reaches first grade students to believe in themselves as owning their own learning. And I think that that's a wonderful message to send through the first grade kids that she teaches. So let's say you move from first grade.
Hold on.
Oh, pictures.
We gotta do one pictures at a time.
I am photographing. Back to the show. Let's say you're in the perfect world. And so you go from a first grade teacher who is really going after curiosity. And then you travel up to a 5th grade teacher. And let's say you move over from Farmington to Riverdale. And the 5th grader teacher, her message to the students is simply, it is okay to make mistakes. It's simply okay to make mistakes. And if you don't do well on the test, on this assessment, I'm going to allow you to do a redo. Because I really want you to master the subject. This person is Shannon Ward, and she's a 5th grade math teacher at Riverdale. Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong, but she has been at it for 17 years. So I think that there's that level of commitment and that level of passion which is simply outstanding. Thank you. You now move from Riverdale and you get to the high school. And there's one comment that this person left me with. And it had to say, it came from a student. And the student came back and just had a concern, had a question. And from that question that the student asked, the teacher, from his reflective listening standpoint, said, you know, I think I can make what I'm doing in the classroom more powerful and more brilliant outside the classroom. The student came back with a question about, I think it was about the Holocaust. And so the teacher goes ahead and he says, you know, I'm going to have a speaker series simply to highlight humanity and respect for the decency of all people. And that person is Michael Robinson from Houston High School. He teaches AP Geography and Education History. I'm going to freeze Michael for a minute, and I don't want to do this. I didn't do it to the others, but I think that I have a real inquisitive mind, and I have a real dry sense of humor. I think Michael is a member of, and I'm going to whisper it, I think he's a member of the CIA. And I'm going to read, and I kind of want to get your vote. If you look at his accomplishments, there's a couple. One, he's a UT Knox grad. He's got a master's from there. He got an alumni notification award. It's awarded to the alumni of the Department of Theory and Practice at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, because he has made outstanding contributions to the field of education. We had been at UT Knoxville maybe a year ago, and we were interviewing applicants, and a couple of the applicants said, yeah, we heard about that guy being Mr. Robinson, because they have Skyped him in at the UT Knox because he gives such powerful lessons. So powerful that he's gone off to South Korea. That's the CIA deal. He's gone off to India to present creative lessons. He has been recognized as the National Social Studies Teacher of the Year 2014. He is so humble that when I bring that up, he's probably giving me the look of death right now, so I'm not going to look over there. He's also the only person in this room who has held my precious Mary as a child, because Michael and I go way back. So he looks at my daughter Mary and says, I know how to change your diaper, because he has seen her as a newborn. He was there on delivery day. He is such a connected, well-established educator and such a fine person that he probably hates being in front of the audience. But if you listen to the kids' response that are in here, and I appreciate the response, he is very deserving, and he's also just been recently recognized as being a candidate of becoming the Southwest Teacher of the Year in the state of Tennessee. So I'm really humbled to have Michael up here on the stage with us. All three of these representatives, one that has 8 years experience, one that has 17 years experience, and now Michael, I think he has 23 3/4. This night for me, and I know for Alyssa Stratton, who's also in the audience, who's behind all this, it's the highlight of our year to recognize outstanding teachers. And for every 3 that are in this room, I guarantee you there are probably 40 or 50 other teachers in GMSD that have the privilege and the honor of serving students. So congratulations, Michael, and thank you for being here.
So now it's my turn, and I'm going to try to go quickly. I have the honor of recognizing another area where we're excellent in Germantown Municipal Schools, and that's some of our students. We talk about having something for everyone. Fine arts is one of those areas. We want to have rich programs where students are excelling. All West is one of those ways that we can see where students are excelling in fine arts. Each year, musical education associations put on large performances to showcase all the great things that are happening with music education in West Tennessee. We call this All West for short. The most talented and rehearsed players are selected to participate in honor bands to work with guest conductors of great skill and prestige. This year, our district placed 173 students in All West choirs, bands, and orchestras. This is an increase from last year and a testament to the hard work of our music teachers and students. This spring, we will be recognizing All West students at each of our school board members' meetings, so this is another one of those opportunities. And so it's a testament not just to the work that you've put in, because we know the hours that you spent practicing, but it's also a testament to your teachers who are working with you every single day in the classroom, and the parents who are helping you at home, and the lessons that you've had outside of school. We know that it takes a full team to make this reality. And your All West recognition is testament to that. So now, because we have so many, we can't fit all of you up here. When I call your name, if you would stand up, you've already been given your certificates. We're going to recognize you, and we're going to hold applause till the very end till I read all of the names. And then we're going to go out into the foyer so we can take big group pictures with everybody, with all of the school board members. Please forgive me for mispronunciations, but I'm going to try my best. So for Houston Middle School, when I say your name, please stand up and stay standing until everybody has stood up. Sophia Chang, Daniel Yu, Andrew Carter, Ashley Yan, Mega Park, Anissa Pacorni, Will Steen, Matt Wells, Alexandra Jankoff, Neil Jeevan, Nathan Terry, Jaden Robbins, Martin Carradine, Tess Inemark, Ronak Karuhati, Adam Oaf, Paige Flamel, Thomas Moore, Hari Rajajari, Wynn Morse, Elizabeth Seymour, Claire Yu, U.P. Shanker, Andrew Hoffman, Sarah Souza, Patrick Flaherty, James Quack, Ella Jager, Chandy Karuhati, Hank Fleming, Eric Z, McKinley Carradine, Jenna Cho, Yuka Yang, John Thomas, Ian Lahiri, Smayan Sampali, Alexander Leshorn, Skylar Plunk, Chancellor Reynolds, and Hashim Tawana. And we'd also like to have their teacher recognized too. Mr. Spencer Nesvik, thank you for all the work with these students. And congratulations. Y'all can have a seat for right now because we're going to do the high school at the same time, and then we're going to dismiss to take pictures. So for Houston High School, once again, if I call your name, please stand up and stay standing. Numir Ahmed, Max Arnold, Megan Aronson, Miguel Ayuvert, Abby Ayers, Dane Bonaradab, Abigail Bang, Aaron Bardos, Steve Bellis, Charlie Borgsmiller, Jackson Boutwell, Charles Boyd, Graham Brown, Sam Kai, Francisco Cano, Colin Cantwell, Avery Carrico, Maya Chambers, Samantha Clifford, Jason Clifford, Emma Coons, Bo Cotton, Nolan Sychowski, Morgan Dorsey, Brennan Douglas, Kyle Duke, Haley Eskins, Nicole Fan, Luke Ferguson, Virginia Fols, Elliot Frankel, Megumi Fuji, Avani Gardy, Major Glenn, Taylor Hartman, Reagan Hayes, Kylan Hebron, Philip Hill, Nikita Iyer, Jamie Kim, Ashley Kim, Drew Cluck, Josh Lewis, Amy Lee, Sam Libinson, Jesse McAnally, Andrew Morse, Matt Moskovitz, Maria Ornelius, Roshan Parekh, Sylvan Paul, Amelia Pye, Kevin Prassey, Kyle Rains, Noah Shin, James Sowell, Lane Thomas, Devish Tupkar, Abby Wooler, and Kayla Woodard. And once again, we'd like to thank their teachers for their work that they played in this, Matt Taylor and Della Coleman. Thank you to all of you. Once again, this is a testament to the hard work of the students because they're practicing the parents and the teachers, and we can't thank you enough for really showing everyone that we are excellent in Germantown schools. So now we're going to take a short break to take some pictures in the lobby, so if we can have the school board join us and all the students and parents out there so we can do pictures.
So we'll begin with Ms. Jones and the TLN update.
Thank you. This session of the General Assembly is coming to a close. I can't believe it, but it is already getting here. The final calendar for the Senate Education Committee will be next week, and the other House committees will have their final calendars in the next few weeks. The following is just an update on the key bills and resolutions which we took to the legislators last month when we had our day on the Hill. We had mentioned a bill that extends the eligibility for the individualized education account to all IEPs. That has actually been placed on the House Education and Administration and Planning Subcommittee, and it is going before that on that calendar this week, as well as on the Senate Education Committee. We have heard from our Representative Mark White that there does not seem to be much interest on that for the House, so we're hopeful that that will not go further than this week. There was also a bill that was launched or that was introduced for all LEAs to have a licensed social worker in each school. The decision on that has been tabled. They have instead moved towards doing a study on the benefits of social workers. Because there was such a large fiscal note associated with that bill, they decided to go towards a study, so that will not go any further until that study has been done. And lastly is the Senate resolution, 593, and it is asking for a study to be done on the viability of multiple districts in one county. There has been an amendment suggested for that through our legislators. That was pushed from last week to this coming week. We're very hopeful that that might not even make it on the calendar. It might not stay on the calendar. If it does and feels like there is momentum, we will be pushing for that amendment that puts a lot more criteria on it than just cost, academics, graduation rates, things of that nature. The Department of Education did reconvene its task force for the TN Ready, which is to focus on ways to reduce time and amounts of tests. I attended the task force meeting on February 26th. It was very good just to see all the different superintendents, teachers, legislators that were there. The discussion was mainly focused and looking at the 11th grade year of testing. They will be going and looking at other grades as well. I also talked to Commissioner McQueen, and she mentioned that later in the May-June timeframe, they will actually also be looking at all testing, not just the state testing, but the benchmark and all of the other testing, which I think when you look at it in a whole scope, I don't know that you get a clear picture in just looking at what's mandated, because it doesn't seem like it's a lot until you put all of the other testing along with it. So we'll keep you posted on that. The Tennessee Board of Education added 2 new members from Shelby County. Late last year, and the superintendent and I met with Lane Wiseman in early March, and we will meet with Daryl Cobbins next week. We're connecting with them so that the local school board voices can be heard, and that we can better understand their policy changes, so that hopefully we can keep those relationships going, and as policies come about, we can introduce them, or at least our opinions on those to be taken into the meetings. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Next report is for TSBA scope. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, the Tennessee School Board Association each year holds the Student Congress on Policies in Education. And this is where school boards send student delegates from all over the state to meet. And their purpose really is to gain input from the students on issues that are facing the boards of education. And so there were about over 350 students from across the state that took part in a small group mock school board meeting, as well as group discussions centered on delaying school start times, and they gave their opinions and voted on that. They also then debated and voted on the following policies, and I think it's interesting how they voted, because they actually each had a handheld voter, and the students each selected from the school board meetings, they selected a speaker to go up and debate the topics. And so there were 4 topics that they debated and voted on. The first one was student information shall be shared without parent permission. And the students believed that should happen, and they voted to pass that policy. The second one was corporal punishment shall be banned from all schools, and the students voted against banning corporal punishment. Also, all students should pass a civic exam to graduate, which currently occurs in our schools now, and the students passed it that they think that they should take a civic exam in the 11th grade. The final one was cyberbullying shall be a zero-tolerance offense, and the students voted against cyberbullying being a zero-tolerance offense. So it was very interesting to hear their point of views. I was a group facilitator, and I also would like to recognize the Houston High School students that represented our district at the Congress. Carson Lubin, Denobi Onyagacha, Meredith Kretz, and Holden Brewer. And also Brenda Kenny, our guidance counselor at Houston High, accompanied them. So it was very interesting, and I enjoyed participating and engaging with the students across the state.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. For the chairman's report, the entire report will be filed for the record. Just would like to highlight 2 items. I know many of the board members, if not all of you, had the opportunity to attend the performance of Curtains at Houston High School. It was excellent. It was a great, fun evening. They always do such an amazing job. We're so blessed with such talented students and the teachers that bring them to that point. So hopefully everyone got a chance to go see that. And lastly, I was going to touch on the fact that I had the opportunity to attend the National PTA Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. last week at the invitation of the national president. It was an amazing experience. We had a number of speakers, including Alyssa Parker, who is the co-founder of Safe and Sound Schools, who is a parent of a victim of Sandy Hook. So it was a very touching, heartfelt, I don't think there was a dry eye in the audience. But along with her, there were a number of other speakers, and the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, also spoke, which was very interesting. Her remarks, for the most part, were focused on school safety. That was the topic of the entire conference. On Wednesday, we went to the Hill. We were very fortunate to see one of the bills on safe schools pass in the House, overwhelmingly. It was interesting because there were 10 no votes, 5 on each side of the aisle, and everybody wanted to know who those 10 were and make sure it wasn't yours that was that way. So it was House Bill 4909, which was to stop school violence. There are a number of other bills that the PTA is pushing that are all focused on school violence. So overall, and I will pass on some of this information if you're interested, Ms. Jones, for you to look at, but it was a wonderful experience to get to be with advocates from around the world, actually, be up on the Hill in Washington, although it was freezing and snowing. So anyway, I appreciated the experience very much. The remainder of the chairman's report will be filed, and next would be the financial report. Mr. Jones is not able to be with us, so Superintendent Manuel.
So this was sent to you ahead of time, but just to give you some of the highlights that Mr. Jones had sent me. So in the school operating fund, property tax revenue collections totaled $4 million for the month. This represents 25% of the total budgeted. $3.5 million in cash was transferred from the local government to the local government investing pool for investing. In our health insurance fund, medical and pharmacy claims were $486,000 for this month. 277,000 year-to-date losses reported in that fund, so we have claims higher than the previous year. And with our OPEB trust, don't be concerned, we're investing for the long term. Anyone who has money in stocks and bonds know that it has been a turbulent time. And so with the February market fluctuations, there was a 78,000 unrealized loss on investments during this period of time. And the OPEB Commission meets March 21st to receive a report of that investment by U.S. Bank. Just know it's something that we need to track and pay attention to. On your balance sheets for the district, if you look at the school operating fund, our beginning balance was $13,142,000. Our ending balance is $15,343,000. And our federal projects budget, our total liabilities and fund balance was $35,671,000. In our cafeteria fund, it was $244,629,000. So once again, we are seeing sustained gains in our cafeteria account, and from the start of this district, that was one of our challenges, so it's always good to see. In our capital projects, we have total liabilities and fund balance of $1.9 million. Health insurance, we do have reserves that have built up in our health insurance accounts of $2,066,000. And our OPEB trust, where we are in one of the few districts that are paying for all of our ARC as we go. So we're paying our contributions and paying for our retirees. We do see a balance of $2.4 million in our OPEB trust account, even with those fluctuations in the market. And then finally, in our fixed assets, we are looking at $71 million in fixed assets. And that concludes the financial reports. If you have any questions, you're welcome to send them to me or Mr. Jones, and we can get those answered for you.
Thank you. Superintendent's report?
So I just want to highlight a couple of great things happening in the district. One, Mr. Cathy has been working with our transportation provider, Durham Bus Services, and so that now they have opened the Durham Bus Tracker. So there's no wondering where your bus is as it is coming in the mornings or dropping your children off in the afternoons. You can track your bus real time, and it is secure because you log in using your Skyward Student ID. If you haven't gone on to see how this app works, it really is very functional and it's good to use. Another exciting thing happening in our district tomorrow is the ACT school day at Houston High School. So for our 9th and 10th graders, we do practice tests for the ACT. That helps us with some of the tracking, benchmarking for students, and really getting them in the boot camps, remediation they need, or enrichment opportunities. But for our 11th graders, they will be taking the real ACT tomorrow, so make sure they go to bed early tonight. Then the last thing we want to talk about is we're getting ready to start the testing window. And so we will start the state testing periods. So we do have a slide that hopefully we can show. It was up for a second there. Just so you know, one of the things that does concern us is we now have an A to F model for districts in the state. It looks at all the courses, and with our high school especially, we're going to be online. And so for our high school test results, we should have those back by the 22nd. And if we get those test results back by the 22nd, they have said they will count, and the board had to approve this 15% of the students' grades for the class. And just so you know, the council for the state school board has said there's not an opt-out option in Tennessee. You have to take the test. And I want to express how important this is for the district, because if you look at step one, the minimum performance goal, we have to have 95% of our students take all the state tests in grades 3 through 8 and in high school. We also have to have 95% in subgroups. So if they're an ELL student or a student with special needs, or if they're a free and reduced student, those students count even more, and they're smaller groups of those students. So 15 students choosing in those subgroups to not take the test could have a dramatic impact. So just so that our parents and community know that if we had students who didn't take the test, we would immediately not go past step one, like in Monopoly, do not pass go. We would immediately be a district that's in needs of improvement. And so we wouldn't move to the step twos of looking at our achievement, our subgroup status, and our final determinations. So know that it would have a dramatic impact on the district if we did not hit those 95% attendance goals. So just so you know, that would put us at an F, needs of an improvement. With that, that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Superintendent Manuel. Thank you, Superintendent Manuel. Next item on our agenda is citizens to be heard. No cards? Thank you. We will then consider the consent agenda.
I move to approve all the items in the consent agenda.
Second. The motion has been made and seconded to approve all items on the consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes. Thank you. We will now move to board action items. First for your consideration is item 9A, purchase and lease of teacher laptops, student laptops, and iPads. Mr. Pierce?
I'll be glad to give an explanation for this. We are requesting at this time to go ahead and instead of doing lease for teacher laptops and for the next phase of our students one-to-one rollout with laptops, to go ahead and do a purchase. We have identified increases in property taxes and also our BEP funding to pay for those. So we are not taking that funding for other programs. It is unallocated money, increases in revenues that we're seeing. So that is the district administration's recommendation to go ahead and purchase those laptops. One of the concerns that we do want to clarify with the board that we will save those, that money will sit in the individual accounts. So as we go forward, that money will be there in future so that when we need to buy these laptops every single year and next time that we have teacher laptops, that money will be there. If at any time we needed to use that funding for a specific purpose, it would be a board approval at that time. They could deny or approve that reallocation. It would require a budget amendment to do that.
Chair will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the technology purchases with Apple Inc. in the amount of $1,476,318.50.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the technology purchases with Apple Incorporated in the amount of $1,476,318.50. Is there any discussion?
None.
Seeing none, roll call.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes. Next on the agenda is the miscellaneous FY 17-18 budget amendment number 33.
And this budget amendment is the amendment to approve the funding for that purchase. So I will tell the exact amounts in the budget amendment. So if you see, there is a regular instruction equipment addition of $645,000 that we want to spend on this allocation. The two funding sources to pay for that, $247,000 from the maintenance of effort from the city because we've seen an increase in property taxes. That's where that funding is coming from. And then also our BEP allocation, there has been an increase, and so we would be requesting $398,000 from that increase in revenue to pay for the computers that you just approved us to buy.
The chair will hear a motion.
I move to approve the miscellaneous fiscal year 17-18 budget amendment number 33.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the miscellaneous fiscal year 17-18 budget amendment number 33. Is there any discussion?
Those three numbers, I'm sorry, Chair.
Ms. Fisher? And Ms. Parker?
Those three numbers, if my adding is correct, only adds up to $1,280,000.
The 645, well, they don't add up. The two numbers for the revenue should add up to the 645. So altogether, they won't add up. So that's where you see the 645 is made up of the BEP, which I think was 298. I just closed.
398.
398.
Okay.
And the money from the increase in property taxes.
I got you. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. And is there any further discussion?
None.
Roll call.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes. Next on our agenda is the Riverdale Air Handler Replacement Award. The chair would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the purchase and installation of 15 replacement unit ventilators at Riverdale School in the amount of $298,723 with Train Company.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the purchase and installation of 15 replacement unit ventilators at Riverdale School in the amount of $298,723 with Train Company. Mr. Cathy, did you have anything? Okay. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes. Nine D of our amended agenda would be the Houston High School athletic facility consideration. At the beginning of the school year, the board was asked to approve a community group's effort to raise approximately $4 million to build both a fine arts facility as well as a field house or athletic facility at Houston High School. Over the last 5 years, Germantown Municipal School District has worked diligently to build partnerships within our community. We have successfully involved the entire community in making our district into the success it is today. One of those opportunities presented itself this fall to this community group seeking to raise funds for a new fine arts facility and the field house at Houston High School. An individual donor stepped forward offering to donate $1 million with the stipulation that the donation was a matching opportunity for both GMSD and the City of Germantown. The $1 million offer specifies the donation is as follows: $300,000 to a fine arts facility, $700,000 to an athletic complex or field house. As a board, we are well aware of the numerous deferred maintenance projects that our district currently has, and we will be aggressively pursuing those as we do each year. We will be discussing our needs with the Financial Advisory Committee for the City of Germantown, as well as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The board has had the chance to discuss this opportunity and its potential impact on our district at 2 successive work sessions, always being mindful of our district's deferred maintenance needs. This donor opportunity presents GMSD with the unique chance to leverage a community partnership to benefit our Houston High School students, our families, and by extension, the entire community. With that in mind, the chair moves that the Board of Education approve GMSD make a matching donation of $1 million, giving $300,000 to a fine arts facility, $700,000 to an athletic facility over a period of 5 years in increments of $200,000 annually. The donation will only be made pending the City of Germantown and the private donor meeting the obligations of matching the district's contribution.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded, and the chair will repeat the motion. It is moved and seconded that the Board of Education approve GMSD make a matching donation of $1 million, giving $300,000 to a fine arts facility and $700,000 to an athletic facility over a period of 5 years in increments of $200,000 annually. The donation will only be made pending the City of Germantown and the private donor meeting the obligation of matching the district's contribution. Is there discussion?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Fisher.
I just think it's important to express my first priority is funding our deferred maintenance. But as the chairman pointed out, that supporting this project, it will be over 5 years. And I think what's important too is that we're going to be gaining funds that are going to be dedicated to fine arts. It also gives us another chance to work with the city as well as members of our community. And so based on all this, I'm in support of going ahead. And I think everybody should be aware too that this really is based on that it's pending that donations are received from the City of Germantown and as well as the community before we proceed.
Is there further discussion?
And I'll clarify too for the general public that the contribution, the requirement for the district to be on board and for us to be partners, even though we're saying we're giving this money, we're spending this money. We're not giving this money to a third party to then spend it for us. We will be the recipient of these funds and we'll use this. And just like all other projects in the district, we are the ones who are responsible for acquiring the architect, developing the plans. Mr. Cathy will work through going through the commissions that we have to for the city to get all of these approved and go through the same process we do just like we did for the new elementary school. But know that we're allocating that we're going to spend this money. We're not giving it to a third party.
Further discussion?
Yes, I would like, Madam Chair. I see this as the beginning of what we will see as the future model for a lot of the upgrades to our district. And the reason I say that is we inherited schools that need a lot of work. And so for us to provide the extras for our students, like an athletic facility or a new fine arts facility, we will need partnerships such as this in order to achieve that kind of excellence. So I see this as the first step into a broader opportunity for our community to become involved in making the school district all that it can be. And that excites me. That really does excite me. And particularly, as Ms. Fisher pointed out, the fact that it doesn't just address one area of our students, but two areas, the fine arts and the athletics, that shows that in the future we can do all kinds of things for our children in these partnerships, whereas the board itself can use their funds effectively in larger ways to deal with some of the delayed maintenance that we have to deal with, which is our first, I mean, that has to be our first priority. If we don't have school buildings that function for our students, we're up a creek. So I get excited about the potential for what is coming after this is hopefully successful. And that's all I have to say about that. So I support it.
Discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes. Last item on business is the approval of the tenure list.
I move to approve to grant tenure to the recommended teachers listed for 2017-18.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve to grant tenure to the recommended teachers listed for the 2017-2018 year. Is there any discussion?
I think we can point out we will be celebrating these tenured teachers in the next school board meeting.
Yes.
That this is just a way of,
We
a
will-
formality of approval.
We will celebrate the newly tenured teachers on April the 16th at the board business meeting. Further discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes. That brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is announcements. Just a reminder to everyone to be sure to check the district's calendar, as well as each of our school websites to discover any of the upcoming involvement opportunities. I know we have a lot with the spring coming on. We have plays happening. There's a lot going on in the district, so be sure you check the district's calendar on a regular basis. Do you have an announcement,
Yes.
Superintendent Manuel?
And we will have another group that we are going to recognize. Our girls' basketball team achieved something that they have never done in the history of athletics at Houston High School, and that's making it to the finals match. And they didn't win that last match, but they had an incredible season, the best that Houston High School has ever had. And so we will be recognizing them at our next board meeting, but I did want them to know how proud we are of them, and I watched their matches. They were incredible.
They were. It was incredible.
I rode the bus.
Okay, with that, the board will next meet on April the 11th. For a work session, we'll be taking our first look at the budget. And the work session will be solely dedicated to that. On April the 16th, we will be also having a work session and business meeting. Work session will begin at 5 p.m. with the business meeting to follow at 6:30 here in City Hall. Are there any further announcements? Seeing no further announcements, no further business to come before the board, we stand adjourned.